Hi, I know some familiar faces in the audience, so thanks for having me. I'm going to talk about the services aspects of Internet of Things, but more specifically also about the business model aspects of Internet of Things, and what I call the evolution, not I call, what is called the evolution towards an ecosystem economy, and the emergence of platforms basically in our environment. That sounds very abstract, but I'm going to try to give that some flavor and some real meat through some concrete examples. I'm just going to first talk about my background so that you know who's standing in front of you and what the angle is I'm coming from. I'm basically been in the business, unfortunately, because I'm getting old, almost 30 years now in ICT business. I graduated in artificial intelligence and went on to do work first for a large company, didn't last very long there, but with startups on supply chain management and integrated logistics, which is very close to the manufacturing 4.0 field that has been talked about already. I actually worked in industry a long time, then went on to start an organization called iMinds, a research organization and incubator based here in Belgium. That actually, I got the news today, was just voted number 4 in the global international ranking of university business incubators. So I've been active in that field of, let's say, startup creation. And ultimately, because of that, having been also a business angel in a couple of companies, worked in venture capital, and now moved on from iMinds and started a new organization, Explore. That's essentially focusing on the impact of digital technology on the financial services market. And I'll come back to the link between that market and the Internet of Things later as well. We are an ecosystem organization and a venture capital fund based out of Brussels. And I'm also part of the Connect Advisory Forum. That's my European link, where I was part of the Internet of Things task force that also advised the creation of those large-scale pilots that Mario talked about. Now, if I look back those 30 years, what you see as the mega trend, of course, is that we have a phenomenal acceleration of adoption rates of technology. And we have to think that through. That's also going to be true with Internet of Things. I'll give an example from my current domain, which is banking. It took Barclays, one of the leading banks in terms of technology adoption, about 15 years to reach 6 million users with internet banking. It took them 4 years to reach 6 million users with mobile banking. If they start using Internet of Things technology for insurance purposes, for example, in connected cars, the deployment of that could even be faster. So we have to think through also in terms of how we build our businesses, how we build our services, that we have to compete in this faster cycles. We all see these charts of the enormous numbers of trillions, actually, of sensors that are going to be deployed. I'm not going to move into that, but I want, from this report, I didn't put the data on the slide. What struck me, this is from a recent report of Business Insider on the evolution of the Internet of Things market, and they estimate that between now and 2020, about $6 trillion of dollars will be invested in that market. And the point I want to make is, of those 6 billion, 3 billion will be in application development and system integration. So the services component, the applications that run on top of these Internet of Things technologies and sensor networks are just as important, and that's what I'm going to focus on in this presentation. A lot has to do with the fact that we're in this environment not just dealing with hardware, but with software and application, as I said. And I think there's a convergence of 3 mega trends, technology trends, that we need to take into account. As I said, I was originally trained as a computer scientist, and then worked in artificial intelligence. Now, what we see emerging right now is there's a resurgence of the concept of artificial intelligence. It used to be outdated. It actually disappeared from the radar screen from a lot of people. But because of the massive amount of data that's being generated through the internet, through social networks, through sensors, etc., data science, machine learning, and artificial intelligence are evolving extremely quickly, right? And that's the opportunity to do something with all that data that comes from the connected objects that the Internet of Things is commonly named the Internet of Things. Now, just to illustrate that through a personal example, when I did my thesis at university, it was actually a project with a manufacturer, because manufacturing 4.0 was talked about. And the purpose of the solution I had to build was to take all the data from the plant floor and then create intelligent schedules for the planning environment for the next shift. So in those days, which is 25 years ago, it was quite a challenge and effort actually to get all the data from the machines and the products that were on the work floor once every shift, to get that correctly and then to make a plan for the next shift. Yeah? If I then ran my artificial intelligence program on that data, on the hardware that was then available, it took about 8 hours to actually create the plan, which was just 8 hours too late because you needed it in the beginning of the shift, right? Well, it was a nice PhD thesis, but it never ended up being anything than a thesis. It never was put into practice. What has changed if we go forward 25 years? Massive computing capability would run that program that I then wrote probably in half a minute. The data will be available real time, so you don't have to do it once every 8 hours. You reschedule when appropriate based on exceptions that come out of the work floor. And you actually have mobile technology that can actually distribute the plans and people can interact with it, where we actually still printed lists that people then had to take to their machine, although I printed them 8 hours too late. That's how the world has changed in manufacturing, but in all domains, right? And I cannot stress enough the importance of machine learning and data analysis in this new field, because that's where the value will be, right? The third thing I want to quickly talk about also is distributed trust. There's a phenomenon coming, and I'm actually very exposed to it right now because I'm working in the financial services market, that you should really look into in conjunction with Internet of Things, and that is the whole concept of blockchain. The idea that it's not anymore a central authority that's going to manage the registry of transactions, for example, money exchange, of security exchange, or any kind of contracts or data exchange, but that's its distributed technology that is actually peer-to-peer. And blockchain has the potential in the IT world to do in other domains what peer-to-peer has done in content with originally, and there's an interesting analogy between the criminal origins of blockchain for Bitcoin versus Napster, and then later what happened with peer-to-peer. I'll take the question afterwards, but. Yeah, I'll come back to blockchain in a second, okay? Because I know there's a lot of talk about it, but very few people actually. Anyway, so given that those trends, I want to stress again the fact also that, in my opinion, we shouldn't be talking about the Internet of Things. It's also, these are also slides that were heavily inspired, by the way, by the iMinds period. It's not just about what I'm currently doing for financial services. We believe there also that we are talking, we have to talk about a user-centric, a human, citizen-driven, as it was, internet, and things and data are basically there at the service of the customer, right? So if you think about what will be as services or applications built on top of that infrastructure, the ultimate goal is to personalize the customer experience. And that means you have to look at the entire value chain of your customer experience. Let's take the example of agriculture that was mentioned as well. I was also in Lisbon, and I gave the example there as well for those of you who were there. Sorry to repeat myself, but a person prior to me was talking about using Internet of Things technology in agriculture to actually better monitor fertilization, etc., and to grow healthier food, right? At the same time, a couple of weeks ago, I actually registered for a service called HelloFresh. It's a Berlin-based startup that provides you as a customer with not ready-made meals, but with all the ingredients for customized meals every week, and it inspires you with new menus and stuff like that. And it also gives you YouTube movies about where the food comes from, how sympathetic the goat cheese manufacturer is, etc., etc. Well, what you really want to do is at some point in time have that link through the internet, through Internet of Things technology, to really be able also to have guarantees on where your food came from, whether it was made in a sustainable way, what the quality was, etc., etc. But it's the final consumer who will be the test of the whether that technology actually adds value, and we have to keep that in mind in the services we develop, that the way the value chain will be structured is going to be different than before. It will not be a segment, it's going to be, from a data perspective, extremely integrated. And that brings me to actually my main, as an introduction, to my main message. We're evolving towards a platform economy, and with platform I don't mean a technical platform in the sense that was also indicated in the somewhat in the slides before, but actually a business platform. Yeah, and with a platform economy or business platform economy, what will happen is there are dominant players in that ecosystem economy that will actually build an offering where they bring together partners that then offer services to consumers or business-to-business customers. And that platform could be a technology company, a Google or Facebook, or a Huawei or Cisco, or it could be a combination of both, or it could be a bank, or a retailer, or an operator, and they'll all be competing in that same field because the sectors are converging. Yeah. So when we talk to banks, we don't talk about financial services in the classical sense. We talk to them about the new concept of API banking, where banks actually, I would never have thought that such a technology term as API, application program interface, would actually come out of the mouth of a financial guy, a banker, who's trying to determine whether he will have to compete with an operator and how he would do that, etc., etc. But that's what's happening right now, and it's indicative of the digital disruption that a number of traditional sectors are going through. So now, given that's the model of the future, in my opinion, what does it imply for businesses or organizations who have to compete in that environment? It implies, and also in Internet of Things, that the hyperscalability that you see in data-driven business models, you know, the Snapchats of this world that are growing at a pace that nobody could imagine, that where 15 people build a software application or 20 people and all of a sudden you got 500 million users. Well, all of a sudden, but very quickly, right? That hyperscalability will translate itself also into different sectors. Maybe not at the same pace because there are physical obstacles, etc., physical things that, but still, it'll happen. And it's not because it's because it's all about data, but there's also a number of other factors. And I would like to refer to a related concept that is called exponential organizations. There's a work done by US scientists or economists that are related to the Singularity University about exponential organizations, where they actually try to determine what organizations are able to compete in this kind of environment and what makes them effective, right? And there's a couple of things that are important, I think. One is massive transformation potential, they call it, really disrupting a sector. Uber is a good example in a traditional environment, but you can think, you know, HelloFresh is an interesting one in the food sector, for example. Scalability, and not scalability through technology, because that's a given, but scalability from an organizational perspective. For example, creating an ecosystem where you have apps that are built by others on your offering, so your offering grows much faster than if you do everything yourself, right? Scalability through crowdsourcing. the content on Facebook is not Facebook content. It's not editors at Facebook that make that content. It's the Facebook from everybody who's on the platform. And an organization that is not process-oriented or structured in or hierarchical way, but lets ideas float freely. 2 days ago, somebody told me that they visited Google Research, and they asked Google Research, what methodologies do you have for innovation? And they said, we don't have any. We just have people meet each other in meeting rooms, right? And talk to each other and drink coffee. So there's no methodology. So this kind of organizations where ideas float freely and are very horizontal are definitely in this kind of environment, also internally, the future. I was very inspired a couple of years ago by work by Clayton Christensen on the innovator's dilemma, which is basically a work about why incumbents, whether they're operators or banks or large organizations in general, not always, but in general, do not manage to do disruptive innovation. And what really, I don't believe that's exactly 100% true, but it's true in a lot of cases because those organizations are not structured correctly. If they adapt themselves, they can be hotbeds of innovation, and it happens in certain cases. But in general, right now, disruptive innovation comes from startups. And you, as a large organization, you have to think about how you build an ecosystem where you capture that external innovation. So that brings me to this ecosystem economy. Why it's so important for Internet of Things also is that you have to reach that scale quickly, and if you want to build a platform, it'll be, of course, standards will be important to get scale, and to be able to interact. Otherwise, you can't have people work on your platform, and people will not develop applications if they have to do it for one platform with not enough scale. So if you build standards, the reason is to get scale. Yeah? So standards will be important, but very likely, like always in IT, there will be dominant platforms emerging in terms of usability, customer reach, etc. And they will be, the ones that will be successful will have enough openness and enough of a ecosystem approach to have lots of applications on their platforms. So let me give, because I want to make it short given the time, let me give an example also of how this works out in something as boring as the insurance business, right? I had a discussion yesterday evening with Accenture partners about their work with the pharma industry on the one hand, and with technology industry on the other hand, and with banks as a third sector, because intersectoral aspects were mentioned here before. If you look at life insurance, right? One of the companies that I've as a business angel invested in is a company called Scanadu. And Scanadu is a company that makes a device that actually monitors a number of healthy life signs. It's an interesting story. I want to mention it to you because, in my opinion, it's indicative of how the economy is evolving. Right? It's an entrepreneur from Belgium, actually an older guy. He's even older than me, in his 50s. Who at some point in time wanted to had his idea. I'll skip the personal background. He assembled, and Scanadu was inspired by a contest, an X Prize contest in Silicon Valley, which X Prize is a prize where you make something unattainable. Yeah? And the X Prize contest that Scanadu is inspired by is the Tricorder Prize, to make the device that in Star Trek, Dr. Scotty uses to scan your body and to find out all your vital life signs. Well, Scanadu was set up. A couple of business angels here from Belgium invested about, I think in total, €2 million. The guy moved to Silicon Valley, unfortunately. That's why we're trying to set up enough venture capital here too, because it's hard to scale that kind of company here right now because of venture capital. He started developing it, and then in a very good move, he did a crowdsourcing campaign. And that crowdsourcing campaign gave him another of 2 million of starting capital, but also, I think, 5,000 or 6,000 trial users. with which he's now doing a clinical trial. Based on the enthusiasm of people to actually crowdfund his device, he got enough. He got another 10 million and now another 30 million investments, so he's got 50 million investment in total for this device. And it's actually Chinese money. It's Tencent Holdings that's actually, and another one, Fosun, that's actually investing in them because they're very focused on healthcare and connected wearables as well. Now, if you look at that business model that they're developing with Scanadu, the device is a device you hold against your temple. It's not the point. What he's focusing on are the algorithms to capture the data and try to help you in monitoring your health, based on ECG, heart rate, blood pressure, etc., etc. And the device ultimately, we think, will disappear into a phone because you hold it against your phone, so you might as well be putting it in a phone at some point in time, if the sensor gets small enough. So the business model of that wearable company is based on data. Now, why did he move to the US? He moved to the US because he said the health insurance business in Europe is too regulated. I'll never get to the market here. Although I have to go through FDA compliance in the US, it'll go, at some point in time, I'll be able to go market it through commercial channels, and even more in Asia Pacific. So the regulatory environment and the ability to actually experiment with stuff like that and to also bring it to the market in a commercial way was the reason he moved. Also the money, getting venture capital, but the money would follow if he would be able to do it here. But he's not moving to Europe back yet. I always have these discussions with him because I'm actually pro-European. He's saying, you know, I'll focus on the US and APAC first. When it works there, I'll bring it to Europe, but it's too slow adoption is too slow there. So that brings me to my point that we really, I'm going to skip some slides because otherwise I'll be too long, that we will really need to work on, and that's why we also push it, these large-scale pilots, to actually experiment with technology. And I would encourage the European Commission and the local authorities, we are doing one like that with iMind in Antwerp, an IoT living lab, to not only put the user in the middle, but also to get rid of the rules, privacy, whatever it is that we're in Europe so hung up about, that actually hamper the introduction of certain technologies, at least in contained environments. And then afterwards, if we see that the user or consumer reacts positively to usage of health data to do certain things, despite privacy, potential privacy intrusions, that we then deploy also the same framework across our economy, so to speak, or our society. So for me, those large-scale pilots initiatives are not just technical pilots, they're not just even application pilots. They should also be regulatory pilots, environments where citizens can actually experiment together with technology companies and service suppliers. So to get back to this blockchain thing, because the question was asked before I wrap up, where does that come in? I'll try to rephrase it again. With the monetary example, just think about the consequences of a technology where if I do a transaction with you based on financial or any other kind of transaction, I'm not counting on somebody to verify my identity and your identity, or to verify whether that is a valid transaction. I'm counting on a peer-to-peer system that actually, through the crowd, guarantees the correctness of certain information. And if that would happen in certain domains, it means in financial services, it means ultimately that you would have no national banks, right? But in other domains as well, that kind of distributed trust mechanism where people actually check on each other and compare notes, so to speak, as opposed to somebody central, a central authority doing that, has a lot of potential implications for new kinds of applications where a lot of overhead and a lot of cost is taken out of the system. And I think that will have impact on a number of different verticals, not just limited to the financial domain. If you have more questions about it, we can take it offline in the break. So with those thoughts, I would like to leave you. I skipped a lot of stuff, but for the sake of time, but I'm still around in the break if you have questions. Thank you.